Come on, folks. Come on down where you can hear. Watch your toes. Good. Please have a seat. Well, howdy everybody. I'm Merritt Bellinger. If you've been over to Jacksonville way, I know you know that Bellinger name. Bellinger Lane, Bellinger Hill. Our family homesteaded and farmed this place over 160 years ago. Now they're calling it wine country. That's a mouthful for an old Baptist, you know. Did you feel the ground shake a little bit there?
That's probably your pap rolling over in his grave, all that talk about wine.
Well, she's done introduced herself. This is my wife, Caroline, who herself is a bona fide, genuine Oregon pioneer.
Well, I came across the trail when I was 9 years old with my parents from Indiana. We was riding on the ox cart or walking behind, and it was my job to pick up the cow pies for the fires. Merritt's family started in Canada, where he's born, and then they moved to Michigan and Indiana, Missouri. Well, shoot, your family practically moved all over the Midwest before they hooked up their ox team to come across in 1850.
I was a strapping 17-year-old when we ended up north in Lynn County. My pap filed a claim near Albany, started farming. A year later, we moved south, and a couple years later, finally ended up in Jacksonville. Why, by then, I qualified as a young adult, and I filed my own claim in a place you golfers now call Stewart Meadows. I don't know why they couldn't call it Bellinger or something.
Well, fortunately for me, Merritt's brother Francis chose to stay in Lynn County, and through Francis is when I met my future husband, Merritt.
Thank you, Francis.
Well, Mom and Papa made me wait until I was 16 years old before we got married in 1860. Well, Merritt, tell these folks what it was like before I arrived.
Well, we had the Rogue Valley Indian Wars. First time I know we got here and we signed up, there was a 3-month campaign. Got back for the spring planting, and then 2 years later, there's that big bend in the Rogue River. 23 settlers is killed, so it all started up again. This time then they made me a sergeant because of my experience. Well, praise God, and fortunately we had with us General Joseph Lane, real experienced Indian fighter, and he was later senator from Oregon and an actual candidate for vice president of the United States. Oh, those Indians took terrible losses that campaign. Finally, we got Chiefs George and Limpy to agree to peace agreement, and we were back for the spring planting.
Well, and then the next 10 joyous years were spent with children, coming like clockwork almost every 2 years, including our twin girls who was born in 1868. Well, by then, Merritt's parents had passed, and after the Civil War, the farm began to prosper. Well, by the turn of the century, we was even able to lend some money. Now, you have to understand, farmers are never used to having any extra money to lend, but we were able to lend money to help build the Redmond Hall in Jacksonville. And what a town Jacksonville was. Not without its troubles, though. Then Merritt, being a town elder, he was always in the thick of some emergency or disaster.
I remember a time, 1875, a sheep rancher up to Reese Creek named Daniel McMahon suddenly went missing with about 1,000 of his sheep. Well, things looking suspicious, and then a couple days later down to Bybie's Ferry, we hear a feller, Chester Barden, had crossed the river with a whole lot of sheep.
And the next thing you know, Sheriff T.B. Kent is in Canyonville with a warrant for his arrest on sheep rustling and murder.
I'm glad I'm telling this story. Anyway, his buddy back in town confessed to the whole thing and led the sheriff to the body.
Well, Barton had a long wait in the Jackson County Jail. Started acting funny,
He did.
not eating his meals. Well, he went from a big 200-pounder down to a puny fella by the time his trial came 9 months later.
Yeah, well, he was trying to convince everybody he was crazy.
The term is insane, sir.
Oh, thank you, dear. Anyway, I was on that jury. It had Peter Brett, W.J. Plymale, and myself. Well, the jury, we found that he was sane, but too weak to stand trial. So, funniest thing though, he died a week later.
Merritt Bellinger, that is not a Christian thing to say.
Well, it was real efficient justice.
Can we be done with the murder and mayhem stories? I prefer to talk about the farm.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we lived on our farm for 2 more years before we sold it, and then we moved to 125 acres over on the homestead, where we continued to prosper.
We did, and in 1884, we hired cabinet maker David Lynn to build us a new house. Do you remember what the Oregon Sentinel said about us?
They said we was putting on style. Well, it's a far cry from picking up cow pies on the Oregon Trail, I'll tell you what.
Farmers putting on style. Can you believe that?
By the turn of the century, Merritt knew most everybody all about property. So, of course, he went into real estate. We moved into a beautiful home on Holly Street in Medford. Do you remember right after we was settled? Was my 58th birthday when all of our children and grandchildren showed up. Well, what a day that was. What a life we have led here in Jacksonville in the Rogue Valley.
50 years right here in the Rogue Valley. Thanks for listening, folks. God bless you.